saying it's an honor to be appointed to this position of chairman of the audit committee by the president, by the chairman of the board, Bill Thompson. So I want to thank you for that. Okay. Everyone should take a moment to mute their cell phones, and CUNY TV is transmitting the public session of this meeting live on www.cuny.ed live stream and the CUNY Board of Trustees website. I'm now going to ask to discuss several items on today's agenda. I now move that this meeting convene in executive session pursuant to Article 7, Section 105C and 105F of the Public Officers Law. I make a motion to move into executive session.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. The board will reconvene in public session following this executive session. So, please follow a few.
We're going to let everybody clear.
Allow a few minutes, okay. Everybody clear? Okay, I move to reconvene the public meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. We are now back in public session. We will now take up the following items for approval. Action item 1A, is that right? Mm-hmm. Is the approval of the minutes of the June 3rd, 2024 meeting. I move the approval of the action item 1A. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? That is moved, approved. Okay, policy calendar. I'd like to address the policy calendar. Item 2B1 is a resolution to approve the university's fiscal year 2024 audited financial statements. The university is required to obtain an audit of its consolidated financial statements on an annual basis. The university's external auditor, Grant Thornton, LLC, has independently audited these financial statements for fiscal year 2024 and has given the university a clean opinion. The university is seeking the Board of Trustees approval of the university's fiscal year 2024 audited financial statements. Claire Eston, partner of Grant Thornton, LLC, will present a brief overview of the university's fiscal year 2024 audit process and results.
Thank you. So we are in the final stages of our audit and or audits, actually both on the financial statements and the federal awards. We do have some open items remaining, primarily related to certain testing that we need to do around accounting for fixed assets. We expect to be done with that in the very near term. And then we expect to issue a clean opinion on the financial statements. We do have a couple of slides to walk through to highlight the results of the audit. I don't know if there's
Yeah, John's going to put them up.
Oh, okay, great.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. There we go. So if you go to the next page.
I'm gonna give it to you.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Left to right.
So this summarizes the status of the audit. Again, there's a few things left to do on the financial statement audit and then some testing on the single audit that relates to your federal awards program. We expect to finish the financial statement audit soon, and then single audit will be wrapped up also in the near term. The next couple of slides go through the significant risks and areas of focus. I won't go through the details of that. I think the highlight is you'll see in bold, no exceptions noted. So that's what you would anticipate. And on this page is some areas where we had a plan to do testing. We had presented that plan to this committee. Because there were some errors identified by management during their close process related to the accounting of fixed assets and depreciation, we had to revise our audit plan in response to those heightened risks. The areas in bold are the areas of testing that are responsive to those risks. So we wouldn't normally otherwise do that testing, or the testing that we would do would be different. For example, at the bottom, it talks about testing a sample of expenditures of operation and maintenance of plant. Normally, we wouldn't necessarily pick detailed transactions, but we would do some sort of an analytic. This year, we picked a sample of detailed transactions to make sure it's accounted for correctly. And at the bottom, you'll see that this is where it's open to complete testing. This is going faster than I'm intending it to go. Sorry, I don't know. Here we go. So in the course of the close process by management for the financial statements, they identified 3 errors in the prior year financial statements. One related to some projects that should have been capitalized as fixed assets and depreciated in prior years, but were mistakenly expensed in the current period, in prior year's current period financial statements. The second one, and that's to the tune of about $280 million with $32 million of depreciation catch-up expense. The second item is there were certain projects with a value of approximately $660 million that were not recorded in depreciable assets. They were recorded in construction and process and should have been depreciated. And so that's a reclassification from CIP to fixed assets and a catch-up adjustment of about $74 million of depreciation expense. Those two kind of offset each other. The third one relates to some, what we would refer to maybe as intercompany leases between RF CUNY and CUNY. That's been cleaned up this year as well. These are all reflected as corrections of a immaterial error in the prior year in the draft financial statements that have been shared.
And just because it isn't reflected as far as, when you talk about changes, you're basically talking about temporary years.
Yes, over the course of those temporary
Correct.
years, yeah. With some years being larger than others and some years being smaller, yeah, correct. So in addition to the errors that were identified by management, during the course of our audit, we identified one additional error in the accounting for projects that were in process that should have been depreciated because they were placed into service in a prior year but not moved over and depreciated. So there's a project worth about $104 million that should have been started depreciating at the beginning of fiscal '23 and was not, which represents about $8 million of depreciation that hasn't been booked. This was identified, in contrast to the errors that we've been talking about so far, this error was identified by GT as part of our testing, and that's why it's sort of differentiated from the other ones. We feel comfortable that this is immaterial, it doesn't need to be recorded in the financials. Management will address it as part of FY25, and it will be corrected at that point. Just touching quickly on this, other required communications that we would have to communicate in terms of whether we had modifications to our report, internal control deficiencies, significant difficulties encountered during the audit. Like if we had those things to report, we would report them to you today or at the conclusion of the audit. There will be some things that we'll need to report as we finish related to internal control deficiencies. We're still in the process of evaluating internal control deficiencies, so when we're done with that, we will provide a follow-up communication to this committee.
One other question, just as far as relationship between Grant Thornton and internal control. Obviously, you'd want it almost to be slightly seamless. I would assume that, I'm just asking how we're working well, everything working well together in this regard?
With management?
With management and also, I guess, with internal control also.
Yeah, we feel comfortable with the overall environment, absolutely. We don't issue an opinion on internal control, so I just want to, make sure that that's clear, but we do.
But both tend to work hand in hand, so
Yes.
it's just.
Yep. No, we feel comfortable with it. And speaking of internal control, you know, our responsibility is not to audit for internal control, but to get an understanding of it. And if we find any exceptions, we need to report those if there are either significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. And because we're still in the process of the audit, we're not ready to communicate those yet, but we will communicate them to this committee at the conclusion of the audit. And then just transitioning from the financial statement audit to the uniform guidance audit or single audit, which is the audit of your federal, the Title IV money that you get. We're auditing student financial aid. We're 95% done with that audit, no exceptions. We test eligibility of the students, and there's a number of other areas that we test, but we're pretty close to being done. This year, we're also having to test some FEMA money that you got. You got just over $3 million in FEMA money, and that's kind of the threshold that triggers the need to do an audit is roughly $3 million. So we are just getting started with that piece of it, and as soon as that's done, we'll be able to issue our opinion on the single audit. And then we did include, just for more informational purposes, some industry updates, but I think that concludes our required communications.
Well, thank you for that, and I want to commend the management for bringing to light those errors so that going forward we can correct it and be on the right track, so thank you for that. I move to the approval of item 2B1. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, then that's approved. Moving on, item 2B2 is a resolution to approve the fiscal year 2025 internal audit plan. The proposed fiscal year 2025 internal audit plan was developed in consultation with the university's senior administrative leadership and contemplation of the university's programmatic priorities and strategic vision. The university is seeking the Board of Trustees approval of this plan. Associate Vice Chancellor for Audit, Gordon Taylor, and University Executive Director of Audit, Shani Matthew, are available to respond to any inquiries on the plan. I move the approval of item 2B2. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? That is moved and approved. Item 2B3 is a resolution to approve the fiscal year 2025 internal audit charter. The internal audit charter is a document that formally defines the Office of Internal Audit and Management Services' purpose, authorization, and responsibility with respect to its performance of internal audits. Section 4.02 of the Audit Committee Charter requires the university's Audit Committee to review and approve annually the audit charter governing the university's internal audit activity as discharged by the Office of Internal Audit and Management Services. The university is seeking the Board of Trustees' approval of a revised audit charter for fiscal year 2025. Associate Vice Chancellor for Audit, Gordon Taylor, and University Executive Director of Audit, Shani Matthew, are available to respond to any inquiries on the charter. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the matter? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? That has been approved. Thank you all. Sorry? Oh, okay. With no more items on the agenda, I move to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second?
Second. Happily.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all for your time.
Well done, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Your first meeting, done and dusted.